I think trust yourself. Like stay true to yourself and trust yourself. I think you become a better leader when you become most self-aware. And then what does success look like for you? And like as a human being, maybe not as, a leader in an organization, but like what does success look like what you want people to be saying about you. And that's kind of where I think the self-awareness is helpful.
Welcome to 99 Humans. My name is Jeff Lakusta, curious coach and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, striving to understand how little things generate big impact.
And I'm Nadia, Carta, tech executive and lifestyle coach with a mission to transform lives and corporations by kindling hearts to generate a zeal for life.
Each week, we investigate stories about the human side of leadership to re-energize your spirit and help you become a stronger leader.
Because the reality is that leadership is messy, goofy, challenging, but always human.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Let's dive in.
Okay, it's happening.
It is happening. So yes, we should get together, bring the whole group in. Mimi,
So where are you at these days, Alexis? I've been following your movements, but you move so fast that it's like speed of light.
I've been moving fast and breaking so many things. So you can guess where I went after Google.
You're living the mantra. That was a good mantra. I liked that, actually.
I mean, we took out the breaking things, but I think what I'd love to touch on when we talk about messy leadership is some of the things that broke and how hard that was from a leadership perspective. But yeah, so, I guess like last I was working with you guys, we were commercializing products together. Nadia, you and I were bringing like brand safety, verification, all of these like brand measurement and verification tools into like the markets globally and getting feedback from customers, doing some fun road shows. And then you guys know Google, like we all have imposter syndrome. Everyone's so smart and so capable. And like, how do you grow? I had been in finance before business school before I got to Google. And I wanted to really get more breadth of knowledge across the industry. So Facebook, it's funny, like right before I left, one of my like final projects was also very messy in terms of leadership was ahead of the 2016 election. We were, Facebook was seeing a lot, both like political advertiser brand, like political brand dollars and an app revenue, like how, like monetizing our, their app, inventory way better than we were. So my job was to kind of jump in and help work with the sales team and figure out what is it that Facebook has that we don't, and like go back kind of. I don't know if you remember, do you guys know what BFM stands for? Because we had like, we would gather all of the like sales materials and we'd gather all like this, basically like, what are the sales benefits? Like what's interesting to salespeople that like Facebook has that we don't? And like, how do we kind of translate that into our product roadmap? And so we would put this all together and we'd go to the BFM, which I only remember as the big fucking meeting. I don't know if you guys remember what it actually stands for. I think it's
business forecasting metrics, but
okay,
I think you're more right, actually.
Business forecast meeting, right. But we called it the big fucking meeting. And who was there? Like, it was like, I was trying to remember who was there. Like Philip was like there from a sales leadership perspective, and like Isar, and who was with Isar like at the time? I don't know. But anyways, we all got
the business,
together.
all the product, all the legal people to make big decisions.
Right. So we all got together and we were like, okay, here's what the sales team is saying that like Facebook has. Well, first, LiveRamp instantly onboards voter file data. So we want all of that like instantaneously put, no contract required with LiveRamp. We just want you to like we want to be able to target based on like all the voter file data as quickly as it comes. That was a concern to us because then we would be bringing in like probabilistic data as opposed to like the deterministic data that we had. And then I was like, oh, well, Facebook, everybody has a phone number attached to their, so like we're able to target people based on their phone number. We know exactly who they are. So we were like, we had this product that was, I don't know if they still have it, but like customer match. The idea was like, okay, well, if we can attach people's Gmail to their phone number, like we can, and we use that for advertising, like let's, that would make us a lot of money. And so anyways, those are just two examples, but we all decided like that would, first of all, that would take forever because we really thought carefully, we all kind of agreed that it doesn't really make sense. Like the Google Gmail relationship, for example, with the user is very different than the Facebook relationship with the user. And we couldn't, like people don't want to see like stuff that like data coming from their Gmail going to other places. So anyways, we all decided we weren't going to do any of it, but it was a really good learning opportunity. And
Can I interrupt you real quick because you're bringing us to politics and advertising, and we're right at the cusp of a new president. And I have also worked on the politics side of the advertising business. And so it's interesting to hear your kind of like, what decisions are we going to make on capabilities? Because all these big tech companies that are in the news constantly, vilified or championed about their role in politics, it's about what capabilities are there. And I won't say, like maybe what was going on at Google when I was there, but I will share a story of talking to the agencies who control the political dollars for both Republican and Democrat stories. That was my job, was to go to them and say, here's what we can do, which it sounds like you were helping make the decisions of what we could do. And it was, a hot time because there had just been a lot of news about Cambridge Analytica and all of this. And we had set some lines that we felt were appropriate, but there was no actual new laws. And that's immediately where all of their minds go. So it's just billions and billions, way more money than I think any human thinks makes sense to be involved in politics. But when you go, hey, this is what you can and can't do, their response was, oh, is this because it's a law? To which we go, no, this is just sort of what we think is right and fair. There haven't been any laws made. And they go, oh, great, we'll just go spend somewhere else where it's allowed then. And it was, to me, a little bit of a disheartening experience to see the system. And I do understand it, right? It was still within the bounds of the system. Nothing was happening. But I kind of left my experience working in ads and politics, honestly, feeling a little down, like, oh, shit, this is how it works. I get it. It makes sense. But I sure wish, we were doing things to put more guardrails. I'm curious what your kind of overall, because you've seen Facebook and Google, and we're in a time where people are thinking about this. What do you think about kind of the state of advertising's role in our political system?
I mean, I think you're exactly right. It's like, it's very like, there's this control of, I think everyone's kind of feeling like, well, if it's not a law, like no one has to do it. You have like corporations who are like engagement, like things that are biased, that have bias, things that are polarizing, things that are false. Like it's a tale as old as time that drives engagement, whether it's like online or offline, right? And so I think like I agree, and I think one of the biggest like laws that concern me the most, and so like we all know like the Meta announcement about, they're no longer going to be fact checking. And, so I'm part of the Integrity Institute, where we've had like a lot of conversations about it, because a lot of trust and safety workers are like going to lose their jobs because like, all of a sudden, we have a new president, and like there is some clear understanding that like they're going to stay, especially like Republicans, just like generally stay away from like, trying to have more control, more laws, right? And so I think the issue really is the law, right? It's not even like, okay, Meta, like, yes, Meta is doing this, but it's really like Section 230 of the Communications Act was basically said that whereas the New York Times is responsible for the editorial content and the stuff that comes onto their app, Facebook and Google have no obligation to what comes up to the algorithm. They can't get sued for it. There's been like a lot of cases where they've won. And I hope that changes. I don't really know. And again, like it is, as you're part of this industry, and like really when I was working at Google on brand safety, I really thought I was saving the world one ad at a time, because like all these brands were like, oh, am I appearing in like, they're like, I'm appearing on this horrible like publisher, who will not be named. Like, why do I keep appearing there? And I'm like, I will fix this for you. And in some ways, like, it's really not, there are some things that we can't control. And as someone who likes to solve hard problems, like I get myself really deep into it, but then realize like, yeah, the government needs to step in a little bit here and help us out.
Wow, we literally went deep into the weeds, which is fascinating. These teams are so complex, and when we think about it, it's not right or wrong. If I step back for a minute, Alexis, I'm wondering, how do you live life with this passion that you seem that you have for all these topics, and then the fact that eventually you have the necessity of leading and have a position, and obviously I know you also have a family. So what is the style that you brought forward in an industry that sometimes can feel pretty impossible to have an impact? Like those problems we're talking about are so bigger than us. So what's your anchor? What's your purpose?
I think you're absolutely right. Like I think some of the and I think like I love the idea of like humanizing leadership, because I've done a lot of studies on kind of like building with empathy, like how do you build products with empathy to like understand people and like not just think about people as numbers, because that's, as we think about it, like advertising is all about numbers and people as numbers. But one thing I would draw back to is just the idea that, yeah, like we can't solve every problem. And I think being in tech, that is a big challenge. And I think it's a challenge for a lot of people, that like there's so much uncertainty and everybody is very uncomfortable. And like acknowledging that, there are some times you can't change, like there is only so little you can do. So like I think part of it is like I focus on what I can control. And one of the things that what I love, like what actually like drives me, and I think what drives me is like bringing people together and like speaking for like what's fair and what's right. And so like that doesn't always mean, what's fair and what's right for, the corporation, which is sometimes challenging, but to some extent, like focusing on the people in the corporation and the stakeholders, like everybody has, I would say like corporate, we are like, especially in the US, right? Like we are a service-based economy. We are a people-driven economy. And like, if, people are happy, they do good work, right? And they are like more, so I think about that as like, one example I would draw to, because like going back to like Cambridge Analytica, which I had to deal with at Facebook, like the aftermath of that. But also like some of the challenges that we faced, which were that the product was scaling too fast and couldn't keep up. And there were some real barriers to like, and the sales teams were very angry with like the engineering team. And I was kind of in that middle place and talking to, okay, so like, let me give you one example. On the Tuesday before Black Friday, when I was there was a big engineering user error where they like basically put everything in as caps lock. All the URLs that came in were caps lock. They called it caps lock. Like, and basically all of the ad platforms and the front end platform, like Facebook platforms, all shut down. Like they were all broken for the whole Tuesday before Black Friday. So these direct to consumer sales teams and businesses who've built their businesses on top of Facebook, are like their VCs are like, you have to figure out a different way to acquire new users, because like on the Tuesday before Black Friday, you lost that whole day of acquisition because Facebook is down. So the sales teams were mad, and like rightly so. And when you talk to the engineers, they're like, listen, like we're scale it. Yes, Google is like more consistent, but like we're scaling 10 times as fast. Like valid, but also that doesn't like take back that day of customer acquisition, right? So there was nothing I could do to help it. But what I could do was like humanize the situation and like, let's bring everybody together and let's talk about it. Let's answer some of the questions. Let's talk about some of the problems. And instead of attacking each other as people, let's attack the problem together. And I think that's like what I would say is like my core driver is like, okay, like let's have the hard like topics. Like I've been told by people that like, I sometimes die on every hill, but I'm like, I will die on this hill of like, let's never attack people. Let's always attack the problem, because I think we can solve it so much better if we're not like on the attack with each other. And it's easy to do, right? Because when stuff goes wrong, when like, you have this big PR narrative that like, YouTube is, brands are, funding terrorism via YouTube. Like that's not pretty, and who do they go after? They go after the brand safety people, because like, like, why didn't you help protect us from that? So
it's one thing to live your life that way, which I love. But I can imagine it's hard to get the other side to also live that way, right? Like they're coming in angry at the people, the problem, whatever, the situation, which you are not able to fix. How does that go? What tips do you have for helping them maybe see the human and kind of get back onto the same team? Because I get you can go in there with that approach, but maybe they just go, I really don't care, Alexis, just get it working again, and like, well, this is not an option.
Right. Well, and I think you and I have had that experience too with like an advertiser who's just like, when you're building a customized solution for an advertiser and they're like, well, this doesn't work for me. And like, it doesn't matter that like the backstory, right? But like, you're right. Like, I think it's really hard. But I just think about like how I would want this person to like remember me as like you, because like one of the things I always say is like like products come and go. Like, like the company I was working for, Amiibo, I worked there for 9 months, and the company was acquired by Google. And like I've made some of my closest relationships there because everything broke. Like, because like we all lost our jobs kind of. And like it's just so products come and go, like problems come and go, but in the end, like the people are the people. And so I just like, that's what I come to. And I'm like, okay, like I've done everything that I could feel good about myself, like leaving this conversation. And like, there's not like, I have no control over like you are, like, and it's hard for us, like type A people who like want to control everything, to just be like, okay, like that's one person in the world that like, maybe I didn't please them as a people pleaser also, like, but, but I have to just be like, okay, did I feel good about like what I did, my contribution to that partnership. Right. So.
Alexis, I want to do a hard pivot, because I know when we were preparing for this conversation, you mentioned that you see parenting also as leadership, and I couldn't agree more. But also you spent so many years in those large corporations. And it's funny because when you and I met, neither I or you had families. And then, in this past 10 years, did you already have your kids back then?
No, I had two kids.
Well,
I love you for saying that I was so cool and hip that I didn't have kids, but I actually did have 2 children.
You had them.
Yes, I was pregnant with my second kid when I started at Google.
Now you have 3 between 6 to 14, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So wait, when you were in Paris with me, you already had them.
Yes.
Wow, we never had a conversation about that, because I guess I started later. So
Right. When you don't have kids, it's not really an exciting like conversation. And I do think there's like a separate, like it's a hard separation between like the the moms who don't have kids and the moms who do have, like, I'm sorry, the women who do have kids and the women who don't have kids in the workplace. Like that's a challenge too. It's like, okay, like we're almost as different as like, there, it's like you just have different interests and different
Yeah, it's
needs.
true. I have to say, I always pay attention not to speak about kids when I know I'm around with people with no kids, because I don't realize the conversation. So, Jeff, we apologize.
No, I love it. I was going to go to the parenting question too. So I'm curious to hear how you apply it.
Right. So tell us why parenting, in your opinion, and leadership have something in common. What's in there?
Well, yeah. I mean, so even like, so I have 3 children. One of them is neuroatypical. So even when just like when my first was born, like neurotypical, and she's amazing and all my kids are amazing, but like she is like my mom basically, but it was still hard to, it was still hard to parent. And like my husband always said, like, your child is the best part of your day, but also the hardest part of your day. And like, I definitely agree with that. Because there's no guidebook, right? There's no like, and especially when you have a neuroatypical kid, that's even more like, I had my first kid and I was like, I can do this. And then like, of course, the second one comes out and you're like, oh, there's a whole new rule book that I didn't get the memo to, and I have to figure it out. And it is like that. I talk about like being a type A person and feeling like I need to control everything. Like I've had to like lose a little bit of control of the situation and let them fail. And it's a hard balance, I think. Like, like you know how like you can't negotiate with terrorists. Well, I think 4-year-olds are also terrorists. So like I learned a lot about that, and just kind of like working with tough people, just like how like this person is completely impractical in their needs. Like we were talking about before, like how do you handle them? And it's like you handle them with care. You try to make sure that let them know you understand them, but also there's nothing you can do about it. So like there's no guidebook. Like I had friends who I was going through this process, the baby's process with, and they were like, well, what bottle do you recommend? Like what brand of bottle do you recommend? And I kind of like was like, I love that I have people who are like such control freaks that they can give me like a review of each one of the bottles, but also like, I feel like there's some like test and learn that I have to do with my kids, which I learned both like in beta testing products and also in, testing things with kids. Like not every kid is the same. You really have to like learn from, like really focus your efforts on like understanding people who have their own minds and their own wants. So that's one key learning. I also like, I learned a lot more about myself, I think, through like, because I think as team leaders, I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I feel like you can always fight harder for your team than you can for yourself. Like I can advocate better for my team. I can advocate better for my kids than I can advocate for myself. And I learned that like I'm a good advocate. And I think my son, having to advocate for my son through the process of like a 504 and like not getting what he needs. And like, again, with like, there aren't really laws for like, specifically my son is twice exceptional, which in the state of New York is not a disability. So I've had to kind of fight for everything that he needs. Is like, it's not like, oh, this is well known that kids like this need this. It's like, I have to fight for every accommodation. And that's been a real challenge and also an opportunity to learn how to advocate in the best ways.
Well, can I also say, because you're picturing all of this in such a brave way. I mean, you're such a superhero, but it sounds very exhausting as well. And what I find in common with leadership is exhausting at times. I've been speaking with so many peers that, go to director, VPs, like so many levels, and they say it's exhausting. Some of them even said to me in this week, they were like, we don't even know if it's worth it anymore. So how do you recover from such exhaustion?
I think you're right. Like I struggle with this too, because a lot of the stuff I was doing at Google with like women, and we were struggling like ahead of the 2016 election, I think, in our organization, because we had 7 white male leaders, and we were like 50-50 men and women, and we were like, okay, like why is this happening? Like, are females growing as quickly as they could, or like what do we need specifically? And like and especially like when Hillary Clinton lost the election, we were like trying to kind of solve this problem across the board in other places we could solve it. So, I partnered with someone also on the team, and we worked on like creating a women's summit. And it did gain some support from leadership after like a lot of work and a lot of effort. But it was exhausting. And in the end, it's like, if you're not meeting your goal, your like product launch goals, that's what's important. And it's not about like whether you've like gotten women to be happier, working on the team. So it is exhausting, especially when like it's really hard to see like clear benefit of, especially just of being a good leader. And so I don't know, like I think what takes me what makes me less exhausted is like stuff like this, where like I get to see people I really like to spend time with. I like hope that I'm like giving back some like sharing my experience will help someone who's going through this as well. And just like that's the for me, that's what feels good. It's not always about like, yes, like you meet your product requirements, or you like do really well, and like they're like, great, you get a 2% raise, or like, great, like you did a great job, but like we can't really promote you this year. Like that stuff is really hard to take. But when you're doing stuff that like energizes you, I think that helps soften the blow of the exhaustion, right?
I think what you're saying is actually really insightful, because earlier you said, I try and focus on what's in my control. And now framed through, how do you refresh? How do you stay energized in such an exhausting series of roles that you're playing? It sounds like you're saying, well, I stay focused on what matters to me. I stay focused on, and that's a really encouraging way to refresh, because you're not saying take 3 weeks off, go to the Bahamas, lie on the beach. You're in it constantly. Every day you're parenting. Every day you're showing up to work. You're tackling the next challenge, the next difficult client. And the way it sounds like that you're staying energized is by focusing on what energizes you. Like, what is it about this experience that brings me joy? What is it that I find that to be really encouraging as a huge hack, not to immediately take a mental health day or go on vacation, but to reframe how we go about the exhausting activities to find some energy in them too.
100%. Yeah. And I think like it's right. You said focusing on things that you can control. It's like, I've worked with a therapist since like discovering my son's, like it's been challenging just in general, and, dealing with Cambridge Analytica, and all of that. It's like, it has helped me to better like see myself and see what gets like, I'm a very highly sensitive person. I've also learned through this process that I had ADHD and I'm neuroatypical, and like giving myself a little bit more like, just like more appreciation, and more like, you've had to mask like I'm like people might see me as a hyper planner, but it's only because I've had to like, overcompensate. And I think like giving myself, like having good self-awareness of what drives me and what like I'm good at, and doing those things, I think has been like really, really good, and great to talk to somebody about that, a therapist or a coach like Nadia, to spark your Zell,
It's tough because, especially in those corporations, we are all boxed in grids and tables and rubrics and expectations and profiles. And if you are a little different from it, then the question for leaders is, oh my God, how am I going to evaluate this person that still brings value but doesn't match any of the grades? And so being creative and being different it's really hard.
I think you're absolutely right. In a place like Google, where you are literally graded based against, a stack of a million amazing people who are doing amazing things, it's really, really hard. And I give you guys a lot of credit for staying longer than I did. And like, I think that's one of the biggest challenges for me as someone who has ADHD in like a large company. I feel like I'm very creative. I'm very like, I like to, like, the positive about me is that I like to look at problems differently and solutions differently. And I like to attack hard problems, but that doesn't always make you the most successful at a very large company where you need to be a cog in a wheel. I would say Google is not as much like that, but because I think it's like really more about like, can you partner with people? Like I always talk about like Facebook being like move fast and break things. Like, and we always talked about at Google how you are like, we're never going to do anything first, but we're going to do things like very carefully in the right way and at scale. And I think that's like very apparent in like the way that Google works, where you're like kind of very thoughtful and you work with partners and you all like are super aligned before you actually launch something. So,
Alexis, we always close these episodes asking the same question to all of our guests. I'm sure you know which one is it because you said you listened to some, but we always say, what is your word of advice for the people listening to your story?
Like, I think trust yourself, like stay true to yourself, and trust yourself and really like, I think you become a better leader when you become most self-aware. And then also spend a lot of time, like, yeah, like what does success look like for you? And like as a human being, maybe not as, a leader in an organization, but like, what does success look like? Like what you want people to be saying about you. And that's kind of where I think the self-awareness is helpful, because then it's like, okay, at Amazon, we talked about like, PR FAQs, where you basically say like, okay, you're launching a product, and you like, what does the PR say? And then what are like the frequently asked questions? So like going back, like, okay, this moment in time. So like, what am I doing now? I'm consulting. I just left Human earlier this year. I was running an organization to basically continue some of the work we were doing in partnership with Human and White Ops at Google to take down, how can we as an industry make sure that like we actually get fraud out of the ecosystem. And the like, where was I going with this? I think, so consulting now, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say you're spouting wisdom here about trusting yourself, but then also spending the time to know who you are so that you can trust it.
Right. Exactly. Like, like that role really energized me. Consulting really energizes me and helps me. Like I've kind of had to think about where my value is best. And I'm like, I've had these experiences at Google and Amazon and Facebook. And like, where can that value be best? And like, what do I like to do best? And like, where can that value be best unlocked? And that has been like made all the difference. I think like learning about myself and like feeling, I actually had somebody at Google tell me that I needed a speech coach, which I did end up getting a speech coach. And it was a lot of like, pretend you're Angelina Jolie and then you can act your part. But really what was the biggest challenge for me is I never felt like the smartest person in the room. And I never felt like I should be up there speaking, because who am I to speak? And then I guess like I had to answer, who am I? And this is like, and I feel much more confident now about who I am. And
I love that you're saying that, because if they tell you to get a speech coach, what should I get with my Italian accent?
Oh my God. You speak so many languages. What speech coaching, which language would you get speech coaching in? Like
my daughter gives me such a hard time about my accent. You cannot even imagine. Both of them are a perfect English American accent. And they're like, they promote me more often than not, but they're like, Mommy, you don't say that thing in the way you said it. And me, I respond very furiously, say, girl, I speak 4 languages. See you when you speak more than one.
I love it.
Kids
Kids know right where to punch you, I think,
Oh my God. We are like doing all of these efforts. But I hear you, Alexis. It's really hard to succeed in an environment where you feel so much the pressure to be like everybody else.
Exactly.
Alexis, where can people find you if they want to connect?
You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on my email is alexis@arcdig.io.
Amazing. We'll put it in the show notes so you'll hear from folks.
Awesome. Great to talk with you and reconnect. I hope we get to do this more often.
For sure. Well, let me know next time you're in the city so that we can get the gang together and Mimi and Nandita. Nandita is coming on the show actually in a couple of weeks. So that will be an interesting tale as well.
Oh, she's awesome. I can't wait. I'll try to think of some good stories she should tell.
Oh, I love her. I love her.
Good ones. Yeah.
Give us the dirt, then we can spring it on her,
Oh, yeah. I'll give you all the hard-hitting questions.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye. Oh, wow, Jeff. Incredible conversation as always. Our guests are fantastic.
Yeah. What a cool perspective for this moment to dive into the politics and the ethics of that and how it applies to parenting and hard conversations and big problems outside our control. Gosh, I'm feeling that, quite a bit these days. So that was great.
As a non-American, I'm watching all that is happening. And it's funny, I was talking to my husband yesterday and we said, what do you think as a European about this? And then what do you think as an American? Because the perspective changes.
Totally. I like that. And then you could say, what about as a parent? What about as advertising? What about there are a million ways to look at this.
A million angles. Well, what I'm hoping is just for my 401k to grow.
There you go. That's a good thing to hold out for. All right, Nadia, what are you taking away?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I really liked the parting gift. Usually is when our guests are really pouring their love and insights. But specifically, the angle that I liked about that is you need to take the time to get to know yourself. I think the knowing yourself is this thing that we drop so often. It's such a cliche, but it's not that easy to knowing yourself, and the awareness of where is it that you can perform at best versus not, and what do you do with that is actually super hard. I find that one of the hardest thing to do in leadership because we're bound to models that are not necessarily in line with who we are. And I get it. Everybody's always, rather than being a washed up version of somebody else, be the best version of yourself. But it's easier said than done, especially when you're judged. So for me, that area still is one of the things that I thoughtfully spend time reflecting on. Who was me? What is the best version of Nadia? I have no idea.
I love it. It's interesting how, now we're almost to 99 episodes. Almost everyone has had a color of how important it is to know who you are and to follow the values, like so many words and ways of saying this, but that is because it's hard. There wouldn't be such incredible leaders struggling and succeeding at doing this if it wasn't something that we're all learning, time and time again. So I loved that as well. I think I'll go back then to how Alexis frames refreshment, because it did feel really insightful to me to have it be about how you're approaching the work, be it parenting or hard conversations or challenges that are much bigger than us. Gosh, that is energizing to think that I could do the same things. Sometimes I feel like, gosh, I got to clear my calendar. Somehow I need to do less. And that may still be true, but it can also be energizing just to change the mindset around how we're doing things. I need to focus on that. That was something I needed to hear. So I loved that.
Oh, our serendipitous. We always get what we need in the moment from our guests, don't we?
100%. Absolutely.
Well, everybody, as you know, we are recording and publishing the last episodes of 99 Humans. I think you and I, Jeff, should probably record a wrap-up story of all of it.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked me what are the patterns that we're observing. And I was like, wow, when I pause and reflect, I realized that those 99 humans that we interviewed were more similar than different.
Yeah.
Isn't
Which
that
is
crazy?
probably true if we were to interview every human on the planet, by the way, also, which is powerful. That's a great takeaway.
Well, I will say that there is one human that we still haven't booked on the show that you and I started talking about since the very beginning. And that's on you to book it. You know what I'm talking about.
Oh, my brother actually called the other day and said, I really want to do it. Let's find a time. I'm like, yes, we will do it.
Your brother, like we started this podcast talking about having your brother, and maybe it's going to be our last human, our 99.
There we go. For some reason, we've really built this up. He is incredible. So that's a good reason.
Like full circle. Well, after seeing you guys climbing and hiking in the ice, I totally believe that.
That was wild. Yeah. Above my level of skills here.
But you did it. You did it.
I did it. I'm alive.
You're alive. Okay. Well, wherever you're listening, give us 5 stars. We're grateful for your love. And very soon you might be able to pre-order our book. So stay tuned on the news.
All right. Until next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.